Hello, Dr. Andre Pineset here, the Study Doc. Today, we continue answering Stuart's question as part of Ask Dr. Pineset, and we're talking all about high-yield studying. If you have not seen part one, go back and watch part one. I've linked it below in this video, but in part two, we're gonna move now from our approach, from our efficiency principles. We are now gonna start attacking individual aspects of our studying and how we can target what's high yield. The first one, what we're targeting in this video, right? So this is the second stage, is that we are targeting our reading. So we're gonna cover high yield reading strategies that are gonna help us identify what's high yield for our exams. This is an amazing video, guys. Take a second, comment below if you have any questions or if you're excited about this video. If you saw part one, let me know. We're gonna hit the intro and we're gonna get right into the video. All right, guys, Dr. Andre Pineset, I'm the Study Doc, and I'm here as always to help you be a more positive, more productive student. Whether that means you are in high school, you are in college, you're a pre-health student, you're in grad school, wherever you're at, I want you to be a more positive, more productive, more high-level student. Today, we're answering Stuart's question. He submitted a question on my website. It's Ask Dr. P. So thank you for your voicemail, Stuart. And he asked, how can he be less of a time waster? He feels like he studies so much, but he's not doing well on the test. He's not getting the results that he wants based on the amount of work he's putting in. So he wants to be more efficient. He wants to know what's high yield on the test. And so we're doing a series now about how to identify what's high yield on tests. And we've already covered one aspect of that in part one. This is part two, where we're talking about high yield reading. What does it mean to be a high yield reader, y'all? How many of you guys hate to read? Let's start there, right? Because for so many students, reading is one of those things, man. It's like, I'll put it this way, another way. I teach my students in my studying program. I say, hey, listen, everything we do starts with our mindset, starts with our goal setting, starts with understanding our framework, right? Our lens of reference of the world. And one of the things I tell my students is they must understand the one thing. And it's a book by Gary Kellerman. It's a great book. But he asks a question. It's a sentinel question that you guys should all ask yourselves right now. He asks us at every point in our lives, in every moment, in every aspect, if we want to be efficient, if we want to be high level, we want to be great, we have to ask ourselves one quintessential question. What is the one thing I could do right now that will make everything else I do easier or unnecessary? Hear it, guys. It's an amazing, amazing question to ask yourself. Right now in this moment, I have a lot of options. I can do a lot of different things. What is the one thing I can do, the one single thing I can do right now in this moment that will make everything else I thought I needed to do, every other task, every other to-do I have to do, every other accomplishment, every other stepping stone to my career goals that I have to do? What is the one thing right now I can do that makes everything else easier? So what's the stepping stone? What will set me up for later alley-oops? What will make it easier for me to get that stuff done? What will be the big domino to topple to get to the other things? What's the one thing I can do to make everything else easier? Furthermore, what's the one thing I can do that makes everything else not just easier, but what if I could make those other things unnecessary? Meaning I never have to even do, I have this super long to-do list, but if I do this one thing, the other 5 of those other 9 things fade away. I just cut my to-do list in half by doing one thing. It's an amazing question, guys, and I ask myself this all the time. It's something that stuck with me. The book is amazing. If you've never read it, the one thing, I'll put a link for the book in the box below, but it's such a powerful question. And when it comes to studying and being a stellar student, the one thing you can do that makes everything else easier or unnecessary, which is great, free up your time, is reading well, being a high-level reader. If you become a high-level reader, guys, it makes your career so much easier, makes your career so much smoother. And you think about all the different ways it does it, but just as simply something as this. Look at testing. You're like, wait a minute, how does becoming a great reader help me on a test? Well, listen, on a test, you have to read a stem. The way professors, the way the MCAT, the way standard test makers make tests difficult is they make those stems challenging, right? They use conjunction, complex sentences, a comma here, a word here, you missed this one. It's complex reading to make what is easy more difficult. They're obfuscating what the question is. So if you are a high-level reader, you can pinpoint and target and sift through the junk and see what's actually being asked of you. Then when you get to the answers, you'll be a high-level reader, so you can go through those answers and you say, okay, wait, this is misleading, this is not accurate, oh, this is meant to say this, but it's actually this. You'll be able to break these things down better, so it helps you on that test. It helps you read faster. How many of you guys run out of time on tests, right? So if you are a high-level reader, you'll be able to get to that test faster, right? This has nothing to do with the whole rest of your studying, which it changes, but even on tests in every aspect, if you can read well, it changes everything. I myself, guys, was a terrible reader, no good. When I started my freshman year of college, I was an awful, no good. I was the worst reader in the world, and it was killing me. It was killing me because I was someone, as a first-generation college student, I was a black student, I didn't have a big social network. So when I started college, UC Irvine, ferocious anteater, I started college, I didn't have this whole network, I didn't have people I could turn to. When I was there, I was isolated, I was solo, and I was kind of in a situation where I didn't feel like I belonged, I didn't feel like I was as smart as everybody else, and I felt like I couldn't show people I didn't know what I knew. So because of that, instead of going and getting the help I needed or really being active at office hours, group settings, so forth, I shied away. I isolated myself. When we're isolated, guys, we have limited resources available to us. And the resource I had available to me was reading at that point, right? Because I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna go to office hours. I don't wanna go to lecture and be embarrassed, or I was in lecture and I wasn't asking any questions, I was confused. I was just sitting there, so it was a waste of my time. So reading was available to me, but I was such a poor reader that I was getting overwhelmed. I couldn't get through the books and, my notes weren't good, all these kind of things. And so it really hurt me. And then when I turned my career around, guys, I recognized that, listen, what's amazing is the one constant in all of our classes, every class you'll ever take for your whole life, there's always a book on that topic, on that subject. And it turns out there's multiple books on that topic, on that subject. And from all those multiple books, hundreds of chemistry books, hundreds of math books on a certain topic, at least one of them will be very quality, very good. And so if I can become a stellar high-level reader, I set myself up, I put myself in a position where every class I ever enter, I have the opportunity to access a high-quality resource for learning that material. Do you understand what I'm saying to you right now? So when I learned how to read well, I never was scared of any class, whether it was in college, whether it was in grad school when I was doing my master's, or whether it was in medical school, or even in residency when I had to study for my boards. I never had to worry about, how am I gonna learn this? Because I always knew I just gotta find the book, and I'm a high-level reader, so I then can break that book down and I can teach myself the material. And for many of you guys as students, every single semester, every single course is like, okay, what do I do now? It's always this scramble of, what am I doing? How am I doing it? When am I doing it? Will I be successful? And it's all this doubt, and it snowballs, right? When we have doubt and uncertainty, we have stress, we have anxiety, right? We have poor performance, we have procrastination, all these things that are bad for our studying. And so if you can, and to take it all the way back, what's the one thing? If you can learn to read well, guys, it will change your entire study game, your entire life, and your career. So you must learn how to read well. In today's video, what we're talking about is reading strategies for identifying what is high yield in the text. I teach my students an entire reading system that teaches them all aspects of reading. Today, we're gonna focus on how to pinpoint what is high yield when you read. The very first step of this, you guys are with me, you're ready to hear these steps. To set this up, I had to create that belief in you, but if you're ready to hear the first step, like the video right now, let me know, comment, say, Dr. P, you own it today, bringing us that message we need to become better students. So the first thing we have to do, guys, to be a high level reader and to be a reader who's able to identify what is high yield when we read is we must change how we read. For many of you guys, when you sit down and you have a book in front of you and you go to read, you look at reading as a pages per time situation or a chapters per time situation. Meaning you sit down and you say, okay, listen, I got 2 hours. So in these 2 hours, I need to read 3 chapters. Why? Because that's what the syllabus says, what's going on. I gotta read 3 chapters in these 2 hours. And the failure in this and the problem with this approach to reading is that now our focus, our objective is strictly focused on getting through this amount of chapters in this amount of time. Chapters per time. That's our goal. And so to achieve that goal, what will you do? Particularly if you're not a great reader, you will speed up. And so what the trap we fall into is that our reading now, in an attempt to keep up with some artificial timeline that we've created, becomes a thing where we're trying to read faster. We're trying to go as fast as we can through the material. And in that speed, right? When we try to do everything too fast, what happens? Fidelity, quality is sacrificed. And so many of you guys are sabotaging and reducing the quality of your reading, reducing the quality of your learning because you're trying to read too fast because you're putting time pressure, is what I call it. Time pressure, where we're pressurizing ourselves. We're making ourselves feel the crunch of having limited time. It is a time pressure on us that we're placing on ourselves. Does that make sense to everybody? If we feel pressured, we feel burdened. How many of you guys feel this? Oh my God, I don't have enough time, so much to do, little time. If we put that pressure on ourselves, guys, that becomes our focus. And now what success is getting through things, achieving the chapters per time. The problem with that is if we finish 3 chapters, but at the end of those reading sessions, we didn't learn anything. How many of you guys do that? You finish 3 chapters, you're like, I don't know what I read. That's a failure because our goal, our objective, you remember from the previous video, is our goal is to learn what's gonna be on the test. And not just to learn and say, oh, I know it, but can I apply it? Is it functional on that test? So we have to change how we approach our reading. So try to get through. I want you guys to shift your goal to say, listen, if I have 2 hours and in this 2 hours, I'm gonna study biology. In those 2 hours, instead of saying I have to read this many chapters, I want you to say, I'm gonna learn as much as I can in these 2 hours. Change the goal. Even if that means it's only 1 chapter you get through, that will serve you better. And if you don't believe me, guys, it's the truth. The way books are written, the way classes are developed, the early lectures and the early chapters are the fundamentals, are the simple things that then you stack together into more complex arrangements to make the later chapters. Yes? Can we all agree on this, right? In biology, we start with the cell, and then from that one cell, we move to multi-cells, which is an organ, and then we move to multiple organ systems, which is the body, and so forth, and multiple systems, and on and on and on. But it all starts with that cell, that foundation. And if you understand the cell well, and how the cell has organelles and compartments that work together to make the cell work, it would make sense sense that these cells then would work together because they have different cellular components to make an organ. And that these organs that have different cellular components, right, and different organ components would work together in a system to make a whole body where you have a brain that does one thing, a heart that does another thing, and a lung that does everything, and so forth. So it's the building blocks that count. So if you're in a class and you're putting time pressure on yourself, if we can take that back and we should say, listen, I'm not gonna learn all this stuff. I'm not gonna learn everything. I'm not gonna push myself and force myself to read too fast. Instead, I'm gonna focus on learning whatever I read. So if I have 2 hours, I'm gonna read as much as I can, learn as much as I can, and however much reading I get done, that's how much I get done. And if we do that, guys, even if you finish one chapter, that one chapter you'll have down pat, you'll have down solid, and you'll never have to go back and reference that textbook again. How many of you guys go back and reread, re-listen? You go to the lecture, I'm still confused. You're bouncing around. But what if we create clarity on our first read? Wouldn't it be better to leave that 2-hour session with chapter 1 locked down versus having 3 chapters that you barely know? So we have to change that, guys. And instead of going and rushing through all the chapters, I want you to focus on learning as much as you can in each study session. And when you do this, guys, even if you don't get through all the chapters by the end of the course, how much better will you be served having 7 chapters you know well versus having 10 chapters that you don't know very well? Because then what happens is you don't have enough of any of the individual concepts to really execute on the question that's asking about that concept. Oh, so the chapter 3 question you can't answer because you know a little about chapter 3, a little bit chapter 4, and a little bit chapter 2, but you don't really know chapter 3 very well. But instead, if you knew most of the chapters very well, you would do better. So we're gonna change that focus, guys. Additionally, I mentioned earlier, right? What's the one thing you can do to make everything else easier or unnecessary? If you learn those early chapters well, what's cool is those early chapters are the building blocks of the later chapters. So by knowing those very well and taking the time to learn those very well, you will actually make yourself faster as you learn the later chapters because you'll understand the foundational elements of it. You'll understand the building blocks. Okay, I got that, boom. You'll be able to move through and skip a paragraph or do whatever. You'll move faster to the later chapters. Additionally, your understanding, right, your learning will be easier. Feel like, ooh, this is nice. It'll be a more enjoyable experience for you. And the third thing is you'll have a better understanding because you would have locked down chapter 1. Now when I read chapter 2, I got chapter 1 and chapter 2 locked. So when I get to chapter 3, I got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 locked together. And when you're locking all these things together, you're cross-conceptualizing multi-concepts. It's gonna help you on the test. Why? Because on the test, the real challenge questions bring together multiple concepts. But you've already done that by taking the time to learn each individual chapter well in these building blocks and understanding, okay, I got that foundation. I can reason my way to those high-level chapters or whatever. So you're setting yourself up for success in so many ways, guys. But we're changing our focus. When we go to be a high-yield reader, we've got to change our focus to learning well. If that all made sense to you guys, that first point there, if you guys understand what I'm talking about there, like the video right now. Let me know you understand that we're going to change it and we're no longer going to try to get through a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to try to learn as much as we can. Our focus is on learning, not getting through. Our focus is on learning, not seeing. Our focus is on learning as opposed to just sitting and being in front of the book. We're going to learn. The next thing we need to do when we learn, right, we have to approach our learning with a goal. People go, oh, I have a learning goal when you read. But where people miss this is we have to have multiple goals and we have to have like almost like a tentacle, like an octopus. As we're reading, we're doing multiple things and we have to slice those objectives. We have to slice how we're attacking our reading. So many students read and they read poorly because they read word to word. Now I have a whole video about how to improve and be a better reader on my channel. I'll link it in the box below. You guys have to understand that when it comes to being a great reader, one of the reasons that we are a slow reader or we're a bad reader, we don't remember what we read, is that we read word to word. And the problem with reading word to word is that our brain has to hold each of these individual words in the head to be able to go grasp the larger thing. The problem with that is that, guys, you guys know our memories are terrible. Try to memorize a 7-digit number. Now try to memorize a 1,000-word essay. You can't. But if we then shift from memorizing individual words or thinking about individual words and reading from sentence to sentence or paragraph to paragraph, we then don't have to memorize 1,000 words. We can memorize 200 sentences, or we can memorize 10 paragraphs, whatever it might be. So we shrink the volume of information we are actually having to hold in our brain, which is going to help our reading move faster and also be more memorable for us. How we do that, guys, is that we change our reading from saying, listen, as I read, I got to write down everything that's important. I want to take lots of notes. We shift and we tell ourselves, I want to identify the big stuff. I want to identify the big concepts. So it's called conceptualized reading. So when we read, we want to be focused on identifying concepts, not terms, not facts, not details, concepts. What is the concept they're talking about? The construct. And the reason this is so powerful for our reading is that a concept is a framework, is a perspective, is a broad scope brush. It's a workflow, a process. It's a structure that we can then look at. A concept is a general notion. It's an idea. It is the framework with which all the details can be hung from. Or think about like a filing cabinet. You have your Google Drive, right? And your Google Drive is organized in folders. We have one master folder, which is your drive, and then there's individual folders in there, and then inside. For all of you guys who are really organized people, right, and you want to be able to find your stuff, what do? You create create meaningful folders that tell you, okay, if I want to find this, it's going to be in this folder. Those folders are the way to think about concepts. So what we want to do when we study is we want to look for, okay, wait, what are the big folders that I can put the individual docs and information into? And when we do that, guys, what's cool is, it leads to more organized learning. And one of the big aspects of learning well, memorizing well, retaining well is organization and structure to your learning. And I talked about this a lot with the Swedish memory champion a while back on my channel. So check out that episode. I'll link that in the box below, where we talked all things memory. But the number one thing that you can do if you want to be a memory champion, if you want to learn well, want to have big understanding and be able to remember things, is you have to have organization. When we look at things in terms of concepts, that concept serves as the organizational structure of all the details. So now I have like, okay, let's call it like this. This will be our concept. I can hang the individual details into different little areas of this concept. So it's a structure, it's a skeleton to hang your meat on, right? Without our skeleton, right, we just a bag of flesh. But that skeleton gives us structure, and that's what concepts do. So when we do it that way, guys, it's gonna help us organize our learning so we can learn faster, so we can retain longer. Additionally, it's gonna make our reading faster because we're looking for concepts, not individual words. So it's gonna help you at all phases of learning by helping you to create understanding, so you're gonna be able to understand better. It's going to help you create better notes, because now your notes will be conceptual notes, concept-based notes. So they will be more concise. They will be more functional. And this is so important, guys. What is the function of making notes? If we're reading and making notes, what is the function? The function is, guys, is to create a repository of information that allows us to create functional repetitions. And repetitions are what leads to understanding, learning, memory, and so forth and on. What you repetize matters. So if we take the time to focus on concepts and make conceptualized notes, it's going to make our notes more functional for us, have more utility for us. Meaning as we go through them, our repetitions will be better. So therefore we can do less repetition for bigger gains. So what does that do? Makes you a more high level, more efficient student, makes you get at what's high yield. Does that make sense? So we want to make conceptualized notes. And so if we're reading conceptually, we're gonna understand conceptually, we're gonna take really functional notes that have really good understanding in them. They're not just a bunch of random things written down. How many of you guys have notes like that? It's gonna be really focused in, really concise, so we can do more repetitions and more meaningful repetitions. Ultimately, when we have this now conceptualized understanding as we read, it builds this framework to help us solidify for long-term learning. And if you think about this, if I were to throw a concept out to you that you maybe have learned a long time ago. So if I said common denominators, that's a big concept. You may not know all the specifics of it, but if I say common denominator, you're gonna go back and, oh, wait, that was in algebra, and it was something about like what they're both divisible by, something like that. What we remember later is the concept, not the facts. So if we can read conceptually, learn conceptually, take notes conceptually, what we're doing is we're creating a foundation for effective concretization, solidifying of our knowledge for long-term retention. So that way, what you learn right now, you're going to remember not only for the quiz this week, but for the midterm in 3 weeks, for the final in 8 weeks, but also for the big entrance exam to your class 4 years from now, whatever it might be. And I do this all the time. My students will be in coaching sessions, and a student like, oh, I'm so confused on this topic, like, oh my gosh, and I'll have a whole lecture, and we'll just talk about it, and I'll break it down. I'm like, man, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, I haven't taken the subject in 30 years, but I can do it because I was conceptual. So now I've got this concept, I go through, and then we can walk it through together, and we can hang, I got the framework to hang the details on. So if you want to remember things for longer, and you're struggling with that, this is the way you do it. You read conceptually. Yes? Do we understand how we do this, right? So the practical application of this, the how-to of this, is that when you take notes, guys, I want you to take tiered notes. So your notes should start on the left side, right? We have like the Roman numeral, and then we go down, and then we go down, and we go down. And so we have the concepts on the far left. We have the smaller sub-concepts right below that, and then we have the details over on the right. So now we are literally organizing our entire note structure and our thinking conceptually. This is extremely helpful, right? Because we do all this stuff. We conceptualize it all out in the way that we take our notes, and then when we go to review it, we can then cue off to make our reviewing active, the high yield concept, and we can cue down to the individual things, quizzing ourselves actively as we go through. Additionally, it's really hard. So one of the things that people do when we read is we read, jot all this stuff down, and we take notes. It's like throwing paint at a wall. There's so much, we don't know what's high yield. By tearing our notes off that way, we know what the real focus areas are. So if you do a rapid review, whatever, we've got that there. The other aspect of this that people miss on is they'll go through and they'll read a chapter and I'm not sure what's gonna be in the textbook. Use the resources at your disposal. In particular, in the textbook, every single textbook, let me say 99%, let me say everyone, 99% of textbooks, at the end of every chapter will have a chapter summary. They also will have chapter chapter questions. They also will have references. I want you at the end of your reading to take the time and look at that summary and say, listen, does that summary, those are the big concepts. Do those match up with what I have on the left side of my concepts? Oh yeah, it does, great. If not, add those in and say, okay, wait a minute, why did I miss this? Or why did I misallocate this down in the lower tier? How does this fit? And it gives us an opportunity to take the skill we're trying to develop internally. We use external resources to develop our internal self. So we're using the book to develop ourselves to become that person who can create that summary. Additionally, we use the questions to solidify and concretize our learning in a specific way. I'm gonna talk about this more in a later video in this series about how we can get the most out of questions and exams and practice tests to get at high yield. I'll talk about that more later in a different video, but we can utilize that. That's how we're getting out these things. The last thing I'll say about this reading is that we have to, again, use those external resources to create internality. As you read, guys, pay close attention to what portion, what percentage of the chapter, certain concepts of the chapter. So for example, if half the chapter is focused on one concept and the rest of the chapter is broken into 3 different concepts, which of those concepts is higher yield? That first concept. Does that make sense? And so now we're looking at context clues in the textbook to identify what is high yield, what is lower yield. Well, the proportion of pages, of words, of sentences spent on a topic tells you how important it is. If one concept has 3 examples and the other concept only has 1 example or no examples, it tells you that one's more important. So we want to look for clues within the text and the allocation of space in the textbook. What is high yield? What does the author think is important? So they can help us inform what we think is important, and so we can get at the test, guys. Whew. That was high yield reading. Does that make sense to everybody? This is one aspect of reading, but this is one part of reading where we're looking at it saying, listen, from a high yield perspective, how do we get at what's high yield? How do we read better for that? This is how you do it, guys. I hope you have enjoyed this lecture. This is part 2 of our lecture series on how to identify what's high yield. If you've liked this video, if you've enjoyed this video, you got something out of this 20 some odd minutes, take a second and like this video right now. Take a second and share with someone who needs this information so they can be a high level reader, a high yield reader. Take a second, guys. If you're new, subscribe, turn on live notifications for this channel. We are here on the YouTube channel. We've got the podcast going on. It's all over the place, but I'm Andre Pineset. I'm the study doc, guys. I went from being the struggling, terrible, no good reader, the first generation college student, bottom of the pre-med pack, struggling, almost flunking out of college, to becoming top of my class, Stanford Medical School anesthesiologist, traveling the world, teaching students how to learn and be effective. And it starts, guys. What's the one thing? It's reading. So learn how to read and it'll change the game up for you guys. Like I said, I have lots of other videos about reading. And if you really want to step up your reading, take it to the highest of levels, have everything you need, check out my course, guys. The 5 Pillars of Studying Less, Getting Better Grades. It is a transformative system teaching you everything you need to know to be confident, to be efficient in any class you will ever face as a high level student, guys. I use the same system in college, grad school, medical school. I have students in my program who are in high school, who are in college, who are in grad school, who are in nurse school, where all of us are in their professional workplace getting better. So check that out, guys. It's that time, y'all. I have a discount link for it in the box below. This is the end of the video. So how do we always end? No excuses, just dominate, guys. Whatever you're going through, you can be great. If you are a bad reader right now, take it from me. You can be great. Forget the excuses. Let's go. Let's dominate. Let's get it. Everyone have a great, wonderful, fantastical, magical, exceptional, high yield day. See you guys next time. That's it for another episode of the Study Doc Show. Show your love by smashing the like button and commenting in the box below. Today is the day, guys. No more excuses, no more complaining. You're going to take your future into your own hands. You're going to dominate. You're going to be successful. I challenge you. What are you going to do today to make your life better? Get to my website, thestudydoc.com. Grab a free ebook, sign up for a free webinar, and if you're really ready to transform, enroll in one of my life-changing courses or coaching programs. You have greatness inside you. Let me show you how to unlock it so you can dominate and make your dreams a reality. No excuses, just dominate.